Come over here and perform for me. I'm on it. Give me the. Just give me the light. I'm on it. Give me the. You know, realize I am the DJ. So me take up the mic and dance. Just give me the light and pass the joe. Make you feel like you're in control. Yeah, let me know my sides and I got to know which one is gonna catch my flow. Cause I'm in the vibes and I got my dough. Make you feel like I'm in control. Yeah, I'm looking hype and I got.
Happy Sunday evening. I am your host, Mike Barrera, for Barrera's Bucket. I have not done one of these shows in quite some time. If you remember, before the college basketball season began, I've been putting out some preview episodes, but as the Union picked up in their playoff run, and then as I teamed up with Triple Threat Bets all season long to discuss handicapping and making picks, this show got put to the wayside, but I had to make a comeback tonight for one of my favorite days of the entire sporting year, Selection Sunday. It just wrapped up, a couple hours ago, and the Field of 68 is set. I'm also joined by a good friend of mine from Twitter. We've been in connection now for about 2 years now, 2 seasons, Mark Cundiff, and he'll be joining me as well to discuss the Field of 68, his thoughts on sleepers, favorites, and everything else in between. But before I bring Mark on the show, and before we discuss every single team in this bracket, let's go through the sponsors real fast before we get to the nitty-gritty. We got Manscaped. Get 20% off with AT Birds code at manscaped.com. Next up is OddsJam. They are the #1 software platform for Spanish. They use an arbitrary calculator and more, so you never lose a bet again. Sign up today at oddsjam.com. We have La Terrain watches, www.laterrain.com. Use AAT Birds for 10% off at the checkout, and then check out Statement Games at statementgames.com for a fun new way to fantasy sports and entertainment. Win gift cards and prizes. It's free to sign up. Statementgames.com. And last but not least, we have our AAT Sports Network shop at aatsportsnetwork.com/shop. You can get gear from my Across the Pitch show, from my Barrera's Bucket show. As you can see, the shirt I have on here and everything else in between. Johnny always puts out some awesome Eagles gear as well. So please check out that as soon as possible. It's really, really great. But without further ado, I'm going to bring on Mark to the bracket. Let me just bring him into the stream now. Hey, Mark, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, Mike. Really excited to join you, and I know we've been waiting for this day for a while now.
Yeah, I feel like the basketball season is such a grind. I know on Twitter you post all the time. It is a long, long season, but finally Selection Sunday's here. As I mentioned before the show, before I brought you on, it's one of my favorite non-sporting events of the year. It's just really great to see all the teams kind of get what they deserved and what they earned. And of course, you see the snubs as well, unfortunately being left out. But now that the bracket's in place, what was your overall initial reaction? When you saw the Field 68 come out?
I feel like the seeds were pretty close on to what I expected, so I wasn't really surprised by that. I thought Gonzaga had a tougher draw than expected for being the #1 overall, and I think Baylor has a pretty solid path, which could work out well for them.
Yeah, agreed. And I'm sorry, I actually completely forgot to mention, like I said, you and I have connected for a couple of years now, but for the people who don't know you, who don't follow you on Twitter, can you share anything about your background or anything where they can find you and your content?
Well, I tweet a lot on Twitter, put out a lot of college basketball information. It's pretty much strictly college basketball. So I'll be probably putting out more futures plays and just overall basketball information, definitely all throughout the tournament. So
yeah,
look forward to that.
Yeah, exactly. The last year you had a kind of a tournament of your own on Twitter. I just told you a couple weeks ago, I was like, I kept the trophy that you sent to my house. I have it right here just so you guys can see. Listen, if you're going to come against me in a pool, you better be watch out. But Mark sent that over, and it was an awesome gesture. And trust me, I keep that on my nightstand. One of my favorite accomplishments of the recent basketball season. So are you going to be doing that again? Do you know? Or
Yeah, I'm probably going to do something pretty similar. I think last year I did I think it was an Elite Eight, Final Four, and National Champion like picks. It wasn't your traditional bracket pick. So, yeah, I know you ended up winning that. So I thought that was pretty cool. And there were a lot of people that, took part in that. So that was cool. I'll probably be putting that out in the next day or two, obviously before the tournament starts. So yeah, kind of look out for that. So whoever wants to join that, it'll be free, and they can do that.
Yeah, no, it was really cool to do just an extra bit of a twist to the pools that we usually get, especially for someone who may have been out in the first couple of rounds to kind of have that second chance to win something, to win a trophy. So if you do want to do that, if Mark posts that soon, his Twitter handle is streaming along the ticker below. Marquee Futures, you can find him there. Whether it's college basketball or something inspirational, Mark is definitely one of my favorite follows on Twitter. So I guess let's get right into the field of 68. I know Adam's saying hello, Adam. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining the show. He says that Iowa should have been higher. We will discuss Iowa. I know Mark follows the Big Ten a bit, and he was mentioned to me, off air, a few things about Iowa. So we'll look into that. So I want to pull some technology here, Mark. So bear with me. I want to get the screen up that I'm sharing from my other tab. It's my first time ever doing it live, so bear with me here.
Yeah, no problem.
There you go. Awesome. So I have the tab above. As you guys can see, I can kind of scroll up and down. So we're going to start in the let's start with the field, the first four teams, the two playing games. We have, let me see what we have here, if I can pull it up on this side. We have Bryant and Wright State, and we have Rutgers and Notre Dame. Those are the first four teams that will play on Tuesday evening. Any thoughts on those two matchups before they get into the field of 64?
Yeah, I know if people that have been following Conference Week, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of Peter Kiss from Bryant. I believe he leads the nation in scoring right now. I think he's averaging 25 a game. So, he can put on a show himself. So that'll be interesting to see. And you said Rutgers Notre Dame is the other one. I think that one can go either way. I like the way Rutgers has been playing. I think they have a pretty nice balance to their team.
Yeah, I agree. I really thought Notre Dame was going to make it out of the that game against Virginia Tech. I think Tech just obviously kind of picked up steam at the right time. I know preseason people were really, really high on Virginia Tech. They didn't really put it together until that very last push. So, I could definitely see that game going either way. But when it comes to Wright State and Bryant, I agree with you, Mark. I think Bryant with Peter Kiss is just a bit too much for Wright State. I've been following the Horizon League as much as I possibly can, and I really liked Northern Kentucky or even Fort Wayne out of that conference. So the fact that Wright State ended up making it, I think they're good. I think I would have leaned towards another Horizon team against Bryant. I just think Peter Kiss is really, really strong. Offensively speaking, he can definitely carry them to the next round. Unfortunately, they have to face Arizona after that, so I don't really know if any of those teams will make it to the second round after that. But yeah, definitely. So for the first four, I think I'll agree with you there. But now go into the West region, which is what you guys can see on the screen here. We have up first, I would say, you'd probably agree with me, right? Gonzaga is going to be able to pull off that first round win.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. I would say every single person in the world would agree with that. Georgia State will need a prayer to keep it close. So on my other computer on the right-hand side, I'm selecting the picks, so I will track them as we go. But the interesting game in that side of the bracket is Boise State at Memphis. So I like the Mountain West. I know you follow some of the more power conferences. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
This is a really intriguing one because I think Memphis is playing well. I don't think as many people maybe have seen Boise State, but people that follow the Mountain West, Boise State's legit. So Memphis has talent. We know that. They stack up, talent-wise, but this is one of the more intriguing 8-9 games, I think. And I lean Memphis just talent-wise, but Boise State, those guys have played together longer and probably more continuity. So Yeah, that one's tough.
Oh, I agree with you. So, I mean, you look at Memphis and the ups and downs they've had, all season long, kind of dealing with the Penny Hardaway drama in the press conferences, or just the expectations they had, and they really weren't hitting those expectations. And they have a tough game against Boise State. So as you know, for the people who follow me on Twitter, I love the Mountain West Conference. I'm really happy that we got to see Colorado State, Boise State, Wyoming, and San Diego State in this tournament. I think they're more than deserving. So I'm really glad to see that come across. But when you look at the Mountain West, and I just pull up their stats right now, the Boise State defense is 10th in the country, holding teams to 60.9 points per game. And in terms of turnovers, they are forcing 13 turnovers a game. So, as you mentioned, Memphis, facing this kind of veterans Boise State squad is really difficult. I think a lot of people are going to be fading Memphis in this particular matchup. And honestly, if you think of Gonzaga's chance at them as well, it's not going to be a cakewalk for them either.
Yeah.
Boise State's legit, as you mentioned. I think they can definitely keep toe to toe with Memphis and maybe Gonzaga as well. Scrolling down the west region a bit here, we have Connecticut versus New Mexico State out of the WAC. Any thoughts on that one in particular?
Well, this is that 5-12 matchup that everybody's looking at, all the 5-12s. I do like UConn. I think they're pretty tough inside. Adama Sanogo is a pretty tough matchup. Overall, and you know what? Overall, the West region, there's a lot of individual talent in this region.
Yep.
A lot of star power in this. I lean UConn in this.
Yeah, so do I. I agree with you with UConn. I like RJ Cole, and whenever you think of the NCAA tournament, you think of somebody who's going to step up and make that big play, and he is someone who could do that on a consistent basis. So I like what Cole has to offer there. I agree with you with UConn. I forgot to ask you, any particular choice on Boise State and Memphis if you had to fill the bracket?
I would go Memphis.
Memphis, okay. Put Memphis in there for us. Like I said, guys, I'm filling it out on my side over here to kind of piece it together. Next up, we have a matchup against a team that not a lot of people might follow, Vermont. They're facing off against number 4 Arkansas. Interesting enough, this game is going to be held in Buffalo, in New York, so it's much closer to the Vermont. For people who aren't aware of the geographical parts of New York and Vermont, it's about a 5.5-hour, 6-hour drive, depending on what part of Vermont you're coming from. So, and I also know there's a lot of Vermont transplants in New York, so I wouldn't be surprised if we have a bit of a Vermont crowd there. Any thoughts on Arkansas? They also had a lot of expectations after last year's run and the transfer portal being what it was.
Yeah. Arkansas plays fast. They don't shoot it great for as fast as they play. They do have a pretty elite guard in JD Notte. But
yep.
Vermont's another one of those kind of lower majors that really experienced. I think they have 3 guys that shoot 40+% from 3. So they're a team that I think is flying under the radar a little bit. But that's another intriguing matchup right there for a 4-13.
Agreed.
Where are you kind of leaning on that one? Because that's an intriguing one for me.
I agree. I think if I'm going to pick a winner, I think I lean Arkansas, just talent-wise. But if I'm looking at the spread, if I'm trying to bet this game, Vermont was a 15-point favorite in their conference final game, their tournament game, which is a massive spread for any tournament final game. So it shows you they own that conference. Like, that is their wheelhouse. So I think they can keep up with Arkansas. I wouldn't be surprised if they covered. I wouldn't be surprised if they won either. I do lean Arkansas, though. I did kind of like how they put it together a bit throughout the season. So I agree with you there. I think I'll go Arkansas on that one. So next up, we have Bama versus Rutgers or Notre Dame. Assuming, well, I guess does it matter for you if either Rutgers and Notre Dame wins that match against Alabama?
Not really. I think I would lean Rutgers in that matchup.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that would set up a really nice Alabama-Rutgers matchup.
Yeah, I agree with you. Any thoughts in particular about where those two teams would kind of, I guess, pivot at if they went head-to-head against each other between Bama and Rutgers?
Well, is there like a more unpredictable team in the country than Alabama, right?
That's
You
true.
don't know what you're getting with them because we've seen them beat Gonzaga and other top tier teams, and then they've lost to teams that they shouldn't be losing to. But I mean, they say guards win in the tournament, right? And they have a trio of nice guards when they're consistently knocking down shots. So Alabama, I think early on, people were really high on, and then they dropped some games. So they're just up and down. I mean, they're that team that could go on a run, or they can obviously lose first round.
Yeah, that's kind of where I lean. When you're making these picks, I mean, I try to go for the teams that I trust the most, or at least I feel most confident in. And even though I'm not completely sold on Rutgers or Notre Dame entirely, I don't really trust Alabama. I think
Yeah.
I would kind of be kicking myself if I go against Alabama and they end up losing, or
Yeah.
vice versa. So I think I agree with you. I think there's a chance if Rutgers does advance past Notre Dame, I do think they can make the second round. So I'm just for argument's sake and for the fun of it, I'm gonna put Rutgers in the second round on my side over here. Next up though is a match that I absolutely love. It is Texas Tech and Montana State. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I know you like Montana State a lot.
Yes,
I've seen on Twitter you're pretty high in them. I know you did pretty good on them with some picks of yours, but I also think Texas Tech they're pretty solid. They're tough. They're veterans. They really get after it defensively. And man, that's another one of those matchups that's I think going to be a really good game.
I do too. I love Montana State. You're absolutely right. I've been betting them basically all season long. I hit them in the tournament final as well with a money line parlay with Villanova. So you're absolutely right. It's obvious what team I love the most here, but I think because they are facing another team that is strong defensively, that is where I think the hiccup's going to be. If these two defenses are clashing, then is the game going to lean to? I'm going to have to lean Texas Tech because we've seen it. We've seen it earlier in the year. I mean, the Big 12 is a gauntlet. It is absolutely the toughest conference in the country. And if you're going through teams like Baylor and Texas and even West Virginia, it doesn't matter how bad they were towards the end of the year. They're still a tough Big 12 team. You're going to be, it's going to be a tough test. So I think Texas Tech is my lean. I think you'd agree with that. Texas Tech comes out of this one, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe just barely, but I think they can come out of this one.
Yeah.
Next up would be Michigan State and Davidson. Let me scroll down a bit here. Oh, you can see it right there. So what do you think on this one? I kind of have a good thought here on this one.
I like Davidson in this matchup. Michigan State's been inconsistent. I think Davidson won the A-10. Really intriguing storyline too. Foster Loyer coming up playing against his old team, Michigan State. So that's kind of a storyline to follow. And, Davidson is so well coached. I mean, Michigan State obviously has Izzo, so that's going to be a pretty nice, battle of two really good coaches. But I'm leaning Davidson in this matchup.
You read my mind. I think you took the words right out of my mouth. I think Davidson is just a very strong team. They can beat you offensively in so many different ways, and they really haven't given me any reason not to trust them this year. Or Michigan State. I mean, the Big Ten in general, I have some doubts on a lot of those teams, but I think you kind of put it well. Davidson is well coached. They have the scores there that if they're not playing great defensively, they can certainly run up the score on you if needed. So I lean with you there. I want to take that as well in my bracket. Next up, I think this should be a pretty quick conversation. Duke versus CS Fullerton. Any sort of big surprise from you on this 2-15 matchup?
No, I think Duke just way too much talent in that matchup. So, yeah, I'll take Duke.
Yeah, I agree. Even though I think the ACC was much weaker this year, and I think most people can agree with that, Duke is good enough to make it to the next round. Whether they beat Davidson is another story, but we'll kind of cross that bridge when we get there. So I'm going to keep going down. We are now entering the next bracket, or the next region, I should say, the East region. Up first, we have Baylor and Norfolk State. I can't see Baylor losing this game. I'm assuming you agree with that as well.
Yeah.
I don't care who's on that roster or who's healthy or who's not. I think Baylor is just a force to be reckoned with every year. But North Carolina and Marquette. We were talking about this off air. We just confirmed, again, Dawson Garcia is out for the rest of the season. He will not be there for North Carolina. And Marquette, first year under Shaka Smart, they certainly have the talent to win a couple rounds in this tournament. It's just a matter of whether they can put it together. Any thoughts on North Carolina and Marquette? Or a winner?
North Carolina is a team that, they're big, but guard play, at times their guards struggle. Same thing with Marquette. They're, get after it defensively. Sometimes they struggle to score. I'll take North Carolina in this one. Kind of undecided, but just I think a little more talent on North Carolina's end. So that's where I'll go.
Yeah, I agree with you. These two teams certainly can play at a high level. They also can kind of show you major flaws in their game. I do worry North Carolina, with the turnover issues or them just falling asleep defensively. We've seen it a few times already where they can score with the best of them, sure, but they just can't make stops when it matters most. I have a feeling that Marquette might be able to take advantage of that, but talent-wise, you're right. I think North Carolina, a little bit towards the end of the year, after that big win at Duke, maybe he might have kind of gotten some momentum going. So I'll agree with you on this one. For those who know me well enough, I grew up as a North Carolina Tar Heel fan, so I kind of have to pick them at least one game to make it to the next round. So we'll have that matchup next. Next is a game that we'll talk about briefly here. Wyoming and Indiana. I love Wyoming. I know you follow the Big Ten a bit more than I do. What are your thoughts on this one in particular?
I'm actually going to take Wyoming in this game. I think Indiana played pretty well in the Big Ten tournament. They have Trace Jackson Davis, who's kind of a mismatch. I think their guards are another group that's inconsistent. So I'm leaning Wyoming in this matchup.
I am too. Again, another team that I love out of that conference. Graham Ike down low will have his work cut out for him with Jackson Davis for sure. But when you have someone like Hunter Maldonado or Jeffries or anybody else on that roster who can kind of step up and make a big play, especially Hunter, I think he's just a unique talent out in the Mountain West. So I like Wyoming. I think they pull it off. I think Indiana. Unfortunately, I don't think they kind of put it together in this particular match. But Wyoming then faces off against St. Mary's. We saw St. Mary's knock off Gonzaga at home, so we know they can play. We know that they're legit, and they can certainly be physical down in the paint when needed. What are your thoughts on this matchup with St. Mary's?
Yeah, I think the West Coast Conference is kind of underrated in this tournament. I do like St. Mary's, another veteran team. They play really well together, and it's one of those teams it's tough to play against just with the style that they play. So I like St. Mary's in this matchup.
I do too. As much as I love Wyoming, I think their run ends here. I was very impressed with what St. Mary's was able to do, especially, like I said, that home win against Gonzaga. It shows they can be physical, and as much as I like Graham Ike, I don't think he's all there enough yet right now to kind of be able to handle that down low. So I'm going to take St. Mary's as well. Now, Mark, this is one that I love. UCLA and Akron in the 4-13, the beloved 4-13 matchup that people love to take the 13 on. What are your thoughts on this one?
Man, when I saw this matchup, this was really interesting to me because UCLA is a team, top 5 preseason. They've dealt with injuries all year. And they have, they beat Villanova. They put together some really nice games, but I feel like UCLA to me is kind of that like wild card team in this whole region. Like I think they can lose first round or they can go on a similar run to last year. They got most of their guys back from last year that went on a Final Four run. Really pretty good guard play with Johnny Juzang, Tiger Campbell, Jaime Jaquez, who's, kind of a mismatch guy. So I'm going to take UCLA, and UCLA is a big favorite in this, but yes. I think Akron, this is like a sneaky game that, could be interesting late, but I'm going to go UCLA.
I'm going to disagree with you on this one partially. I think UCLA's talent is enough to get to the next round. So if you guys don't remember last year, they had this miraculous run. They were down Michigan State. Michigan State blows the game, and then UCLA takes off. And as we know, they made it to the Final Four. But if you look at the free throw percentage from the opposing teams in that run that they had, Alabama, Michigan, just awful free throw percentage from the opposing teams, which you could say benefited them significantly because they were able to get by in those rounds. Akron is not a great free throw percentage shooting team. They're around 68 or 69%. They just play really, really tough. In the first game of the season, we saw them lose to Ohio State by 1 point. They've been able to beat another tournament team in Wright State. They beat them by 18 points. And then just in terms of the MAC, I mean, they came third in the MAC. They beat out Ohio and Buffalo, who many thought were going to be 1-2 in that conference. They were 14-6 in the MAC, which I thought was a competitive conference. Not great, but competitive within the first 5 or 6 teams. I need to look at the spread on this when I get a second, but I do think Akron will cover that game because
I think this is a big spread too.
Oh, I got now. I have to look this up, right? It's gonna be a Thursday night game, right? Akron. I'm gonna look this up real quick to see what they put. It's a 15 spread. It's already moved to 14.5 on some books, 14 on other books. So this line's already moving a bit. I think I have to take Akron 14.5. If you're looking for a live bet, if UCLA kind of goes on a quick run, maybe you can get them at 16 or 17 early on. But I think Akron will absolutely cover a double-digit number at least in my opinion. So, but I agree with you. I think UCLA is good enough to make it to the next round, which would be great against St. Mary's in that matchup.
Yeah, I agree.
Scrolling down a bit more here, we have Texas versus Virginia Tech. What are your thoughts here?
I like Virginia Tech in this matchup. I think Texas, some people had Texas top 5 preseason. They brought in all these transfers, and it just hasn't really worked. There's been not much consistency really all year. So I'm not as high on Texas. I was high on Virginia Tech before the season, and, they got off to a rough start, and they picked it up. They won the ACC tournament, beat Duke pretty good, and I think they're a dangerous team in the tournament as well. Just because they're a veteran team, their guards are good. Kive Aluma is a really nice big guy who can put it on the floor. He's like a mismatch guy. So, and I think they're really well coached also. So yeah, I like Virginia Tech in this.
I do too. I think there is some significant value in getting hot at the right time with any playoffs, and it doesn't matter what sport. You get hot at the right time, and you can go very far. I'm not convinced with Texas. One of my buddies that I talked to on Facebook, I told him before the season started, watch out for Texas. They're really loaded. And lately he's been like, hey, how about Texas? They're not as good as he thought they'd be. I'm like, all right, calm down. So I agree with you. I think if Texas picked up a team like Yale or St. Peter's, we'd have a different story. But the fact that they got one of the hottest teams right now, I think that's going to be a very, very tough matchup for them. I'm going to go Virginia Tech as the 11th seed. Maybe pulling what we saw from Syracuse the year prior, a little 11 seed run, one of those double-digit seeds kind of going off. So I agree. Virginia Tech there. Purdue and Yale is the next one. Yale out of the Ivy. Purdue, of course, the Big Ten. Purdue, one of the more favored teams to win the national championship before the season started. Thoughts on this one, Mark?
I like Purdue in this. I think just the size, you have Zach Edey, who's 7'4", Travion Williams. Teams from the Ivy League, I don't think see real physical play, and I know they haven't seen bigs like that. Plus, you have an athlete like Jaden Ivey, who's definitely a top probably 5 pick right now. So I think just too much talent, and with the way Purdue scores, I can't see Yale really slowing them down. So I like Purdue.
I like Purdue too. I agree. I think nice run by Yale there to make it to the tournament. I don't think Purdue will lose this game. And it's funny because now we have Purdue against Virginia Tech, a team that we were just talking so highly about, and we'll get to that one in a few minutes. But I agree. Purdue goes on. They're too talented, too big. Now, you were excited about this matchup before we got on air. Murray State with San Francisco, a 7-10 Murray State out of the OVC. San Fran, obviously, out of the WCC. What are you thinking on this one?
This should be a really fun. This should be one of the better, I think, first round matchups, regardless of region. I think you have Murray State, who I believe won 30 games, San Francisco, who had a nice year. And the thing about this, there's going to be great guards on both sides. These are really good teams with, really good guard play. Murray State has Tevin Brown. If anyone hasn't seen him, he's really tough. Jamari Bouye for San Francisco is also really good. So I think that's going to be an exciting game. But it's always nice to see really good guards, and I think that's what that game's going to have.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Any particular choice here between these two teams?
I'm going to take San Francisco just because I think their battle. They played St. Mary's. They've had a pretty solid non-conference. Gave Gonzaga a pretty solid game both times. I've seen those two match up. So I'm going to go San Francisco in this. Even though I think Murray State's going to be a lot of people's, probably I think a lot of people are going to be on Murray State on this, but I'm going to lean San Francisco in this.
Agreed. Yeah, I do take a lot of account into the battle tested. I think, and that's one reason why I picked Baylor last year over Gonzaga. I thought the Big 12 was just a bit tougher last season, and I thought that made the difference. And obviously they won pretty convincingly. But I agree. I think San Fran is a team to be reckoned with. As I love Murray State, I really do. I just think that I don't know. I'm going to have to lean with San Francisco for the reasons you described. Next up, we have Kentucky and St. Peter's. I would agree both of us are going to pick Kentucky on this one. It's far too talented, and we'll kind of dive more into Kentucky in that San Francisco-Kentucky match. We're going to scroll to the right here, and from the top down. In the region is this here? The South region, we have Arizona against Bryant, the team that we selected out of the first two games. Yeah, Arizona, did you say right, against Bryant?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. And now, I mean, I think one concern that I personally have for Arizona in general is the turnover issues. But in this particular matchup, they're not going to have that problem to outscore Bryant. I think they'll be able to handle Peter Kiss pretty decently enough to make it out of there alive. But an interesting game is Seton Hall, the 8th seed against TCU out of the Big 12 and the 9th seed. I like TCU. What are you thinking on this one?
I agree. TCU's playing well right now. I think, Seton Hall's another one of those teams, though, Big East team, pretty physical. But I'm leaning TCU in this.
I lean TCU in it as well. I know Seton Hall had a bit of a rough patch for part of that season. I know they also started out the year great. I'm going to go TCU. I like how they've been looking overall. And like I said, I love the Big 12 in terms of preparing teams for this kind of tournament. So I'll go TCU with a 9 seed over the 8, which is always a difficult one to figure out. Now, one game that I feel bad for is Houston up against UAB. I like UAB a lot, and I feel like Houston is just a tough match for them. What did you think on this one when it came out?
I totally agree. That's the same thing I said when I saw this because, man, you want to pick – people see Houston, they lost Marcus Sasser and Tremont Mark. They lost 2 of their best players, and it's like, how can Houston still be this good? And they're just so physical that I think for a team, like UAB that I just doesn't get run up on teams like Houston in their conference with that physical. But this is an intriguing matchup, though, too, because, it's toughness versus, UAB gets up and down the floor. They put up points. So it's kind of that battle of, tempo versus toughness, I almost would call it. You have Jamal Shedd, who's, I think, one of the more underrated guards for Houston, maybe in the country, who nobody really talks about.
Yeah. And
Jordan Walker for UAB. I know he's had a couple 40-point games, big-time scorer, kid out of New York City. And, I think that could turn into a fun matchup. And, again, it's that 5-12 game. So, but I do think Houston's toughness maybe kind of in the end wins that. But, it's kind of a battle of styles, I think, with that one.
Yeah, I am very torn on this. The spread is 8.5, which I think sounds about right. UAB is a very talented squad. For anybody who didn't watch the Conference USA, they beat out La Tech, which I thought was also another team that could have made the tournament very interesting. But I do think UAB was the better of the two teams. Yeah, there's something about Samson's teams every year. They just always kind of figure it out. Doesn't matter who's on that roster. They always are able to. It's like Jay Wright out of Villanova. For people like in my area, Villanova, doesn't matter who's on there. They're so well coached. They're able to kind of put it together. UAB, if you were betting them a bit, they were kind of tricky to figure out betting wise, in my opinion. They had some games that they should have covered and they did not, and that is one reason why I'm going to take Houston. I think that UAB is good. They could have been a bit better this year, and I think I'm going to lean with Houston as well with you. Next up is another one. I said, "Oh my God, I wish they didn't get this pairing." Illinois and Chattanooga. I like Chattanooga a lot. What were your thoughts on Illinois in this one?
I personally haven't seen Chattanooga, but I've heard good things about them. I know they had a nice record, really consistent. I just think, when you have to, I think Kofi Coburn, when you're dealing with that kind of, big, is just a guy who, if he gets touches, it's just such a big mismatch. And then you have some, you have veterans also with like a Trent Frazier, Alfonso Plummer. So I think the experience is ultimately going to win out for that game. But I think it could turn into an interesting game. We've also seen Illinois, Curbelo playing, and he can turn the ball over in close games, and that's kind of a concern. But in this matchup, I'm going to take Illinois.
It's funny, you're talking about that. I pulled up the line already. It opened up, I believe, opened up at 9, and within the past 2.5 hours, it's already at 7.5. So I mean, people like Chattanooga. If you look at their lineup, they have someone like D'Souza, who's obviously not the size of Coburn, but can battle down low, and they have players like Malachi Smith and John Baptiste, who can really just take over a game. I just don't think Illinois will have what happened last year. So many people had them going deep last year. Then they run into the train that was Loyola Chicago. I think that kind of sits with them. I think they're good enough to make it to the next round. I'm going to agree with you with Illinois. Though I love Chattanooga. I think a different matchup, like maybe even Duke, for example, or Michigan State, they would have had a better chance, but not against Illinois this year. Going down the list, I think for me is an easy decision. I don't know if you agree with me or not. Colorado State and Michigan, 6-11 game.
This should be a good game. I think this is going to be good because Colorado State, another team, Mountain West, had expectations, coming into the year, and they backed it up. They had a really nice season. I think David Roddy is a guy that, he can give anyone trouble. Guards are pretty good. Michigan preseason was, a lot of people picked to win the Big Ten. They've been inconsistent. Point guard play's been inconsistent. I think I'm leaning Colorado State here in this matchup.
You read my mind. I immediately picked Colorado State on this one. David Roddy, as Mark mentioned, is a great kind of unicorn-style player. He can kind of do a bit of everything. He's also big enough to handle someone like Hunter Dickinson down low. Isaiah Stevens out of that backcourt, another nice player. Michigan, I bet on Michigan earlier this year, and their free throw shooting just freaking killed me. I cannot pick Michigan to win the game. I can't. I'm sorry, Michigan fans out there, but I have to lean Colorado State. Well coached, really good talent on that squad. I think this actually could be a blowout. And I'm gonna say here, I think it could be a very good game. Mm-hmm. I just don't trust Michigan, so hopefully that doesn't come back to bite me in the ass later on today or later on this week. Next up is Tennessee and Longwood. A tough matchup for Longwood here. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think Tennessee's playing really well. Obviously, just won the SEC tournament, and they're defensively they're really tough. So I like Tennessee.
I like Tennessee too. Longwood, I know Triple Threat Bets, my partner that I work with, picked Longwood a few times this season on the spread, but in this matchup, Tennessee's, I think, probably one of the best teams out of that conference in the SEC. Doesn't matter record overall. I think they're just finding their groove at the right time. So yeah, Tennessee, that defense, I think it's gonna be too much for Longwood. So I agree with that one. 2 more games, and then we'll kind of go into the next round here, or the next region, rather. Ohio State and Loyola Chicago. Any thoughts on this one?
Well, Ohio State, you have E.J. Liddell, who's one of the better kind of versatile bigs in the country. But to me, Ohio State's guards, their guard play has not been very good. And Loyola Chicago is one of those tournament teams. We know they went on a Final Four run a couple of years ago. I know Lucas Williamson still on the team, who was part of that run. And he's a pretty elite defender. I like Loyola in this matchup. I think this could be a good game. Loyola is one of those teams it's hard to prepare for, because they're another team that plays that style that, they don't take bad shots. They really move the ball. Team that, that you really don't see as much from in like the Big Ten. So I like Loyola in this matchup.
Yeah, the line opened up about basically a pick 'em. It is, Loyola Chicago, favored by 1 point now against Ohio State, which is funny seeing a team that's, in the mid-major being favored against a Big Ten squad. But my only concern with Loyola Chicago, and we saw this a few times at the end of the year, was they had trouble just like doing simple things like keeping the ball from, being a turnover, getting the ball in bounds on late possessions. I don't know if maybe they're just a bit overhyped. Some people would argue that they would not have made the tournament if they didn't win their conference tournament. So that is my concern. I really am torn on this one. I think a lot of people are going to pick Loyola Chicago because of the Sister Jean and the big hype around them. I think Ohio State might be able to get by, but I mean, barely. I think this is actually going to be a very close game. So you think you're going to lean Loyola Chicago on this one?
You know what? When you mentioned the spread, that's interesting. I mean, did you say Loyola? Do you see them as a 1 point favorite?
They're right now on Action Network, a 1 point favorite over Ohio State.
I mean, when you hear that, I kind of like, maybe I'm going back towards Ohio State when I hear that. You know what I mean?
Me too.
Because it is that story, I think, that plays a little bit of a part in it. Loyola, there's kind of that Cinderella team, but when you look at the talent, Ohio State has more talent than Loyola. I think, man, I can go either way with that one. You're leaning Ohio State, so I'll go Ohio State in that.
Yeah, I'll go Ohio State. Sometimes when everybody bets a certain team, I want to just go against it. I feel like everyone's going to be a little Chicago. So we'll go Ohio State. And lastly, out of this region, we have Villanova and Delaware. I would say both of us agree Villanova takes this one, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Gotcha. Yeah, Villanova's, they're figuring things out. Their front court's has some issues against bigger town, but Delaware, even though they are stout defensively or decent defensive squad, I think Nova's too much there. And then our last region before we kind of break down these this much smaller group that we've assembled: Kansas at Texas Southern and or Texas A&M. Was it Corpus Christi? I forgot to mention them earlier in the playing round. Actually, would you say Texas between those two squads?
I'm sorry, it's Kansas, right?
Yeah, Kansas. Yep.
So yeah, either one of those teams, I'm going to take Kansas.
I agree. Just one of those, Texas A&M's CC. I know Triple Threat Bets was bet on them a lot, but maybe they make it out of that first game. But yeah, Kansas, they're just too good. They're not going to be upset even as a 1 seed. The next one is interesting. San Diego State at Creighton, or against Creighton, the 8-9 game. What are you thinking on this one?
Well, San Diego State has Matt Bradley, who's a pretty nice scorer, a good player. Creighton, Big East team, they lost Ryan Nemhard, who I was really high on, really nice point guard. I like San Diego State in this matchup, not with a ton of confidence because they struggle at times scoring the ball, but I like San Diego State.
I like San Diego State too. I was surprised that Creighton kind of put it together without Nemhard. I was pretty
Mhm.
impressed. I mean, I know they got
Yeah.
blown out by Providence in their first game without him, but I thought they put it together recently very nicely, and I actually freaking lost a bet because of it because I faded them. But I think in this one, San Diego State is such a good overall team, and I think there's a little bit too much, even with the front court ability that we've seen from Creighton this past week and a half without Nemhard kind of running the show. So I like San Diego State as well as the 8 seed out of that against Kansas. Going down, a team that we talked about earlier and a team that Adam mentioned in the comments section, Iowa versus Richmond. What are you thinking on this one?
Well, I think Iowa's probably as hot as any team right now in the country. Keegan Murray is, man, he's playing so well. He's kind of that guy that can carry, I think, a team, deep into a tournament. His brother also, the twins, his brother's playing well. Iowa just seems like they're clicking. But Richmond is a team I was high on coming into the year, and they didn't play as good as I thought they would. But you have a guy like Jacob Gilliard, who is one of the top defenders maybe in the country. And Richmond is playing well right now. I think this could be a dangerous game because everyone is going to be on Iowa in this game. Even though it's a 5-12, I think everyone's going to be on Iowa. I think this is a dangerous game for Iowa. I'm going to take Iowa because, they have a lot of momentum and they're playing well. But I think Richmond's been there before. They're really a veteran team. And I think it could be a good game. I don't know what the points are in this, but I think this could be a good game. But I'm going to go Iowa.
I'm going to go Iowa as well. I've been basically on the wrong side of the fence on Richmond all season long. It's hard to get a read on really what they do. I know I faded them, bet on them, and either way, I was just incorrect. The spread is 9.5 right now, which I think is a bit high, honestly. Even though Iowa's been as red hot as they are, now it's moving down to 9 in certain books. On DraftKings, it's 9. I'm sure it's going to hit 8.5, soon enough. But
yeah,
I think if you're looking at the money line play, Iowa, I think it's just kind of like we talked about Virginia Tech. They're getting hot. You kind of have to go with them. But I think a lot of teams will pick Richmond as that 12 upset.
Yeah.
Now, Mark, the one that I loved the most, Providence against South Dakota State. We have a great, great matchup here. What are your thoughts on this one?
This is another intriguing. It's that 13-4 matchup. This should be a really good game. I'm going to let you take this one because I know you're really excited. This is one of those games I know you're really excited to definitely catch.
Yeah, so we talked about, the spread a bit already. Because of how close Providence keeps these games, it didn't matter that South Dakota State was coming out of a lower major, lower conference, rather, like the Summit. This spread's only -2.5, -2. It's, Providence is not getting the love that teams like Iowa are getting, or, Texas, or whoever else you can kind of think of. The books are really keeping this a possible, very, last minute type possession style game. And if you haven't followed South Dakota State, they are absolutely unbelievable offensively. The best 3-point shooting team in the country. They can beat you down low with Doug Wilson, and they can work the ball out to the perimeter where you have players like Shireman and everybody else on that roster who can put up a three. I think there's a tremendous chance that South Dakota State goes in there and takes this game and wins it and goes to the next round. I'm definitely taking the spread on the 2.5. I'm definitely taking the money line. I think they're good enough to do it. Providence, as Mark and you and I discussed in the studio before we went live, has been at times a bit fortunate. I think people said they were the luckier team this year, and I think the luck ran out when they got this particular matchup. I think South Dakota State is just really good offensively, and this should be a fun one. Any particular thoughts on who you're picking though to come out of this round?
Yeah, I agree with you. I'll go South Dakota State.
Let's go South Dakota State, number 13 team. I love it. I can't wait to see them play Iowa if they do advance. We have 4 more games here before we kind of trickle down to the round of 32. LSU and Iowa State here.
Some storylines in this one. LSU's coach was just let go. There's a coaching change, so Will Wade is no longer coaching, I think, which could have an effect on LSU. We've also seen that, on the other side, a team kind of rally around their new guy. But I'm going to go Iowa State. I think they've surprised me during the year. Isaiah Brockington, I think, was one of the more underrated transfers in the country. He's had a really good year. Tyrese Hunter's been really good at guard for them, another kind of underrated freshman guard. So I like Iowa State in this matchup just because I know those guys playing, they all liked Will Wade, but with him gone, I'm going to say that has an effect on their first game.
I agree. I think it's hard to make a coaching change this late in the season, before this important of a matchup. We've seen players, step up for the assistant coach, the interim coach, but I agree. I think Iowa State, they are battle tested. They can definitely, compete with the better teams in the Big 12. So I think they can handle LSU. I'm going to agree with you. Nice 11 upset. We've had 2 consecutive upsets now. 13 South Dakota State and now Iowa State at 11. I love it. Next up, though, I don't think we're going to have an upset here. Wisconsin against Colgate. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I like Wisconsin in this matchup.
I completely agree with you. I think Colgate, I know they had a lot of love last year, but not good enough against Wisconsin this season. So we'll skip ahead to USC versus Miami. What are you thinking on this one?
This is another interesting game because USC's, one of the bigger teams in the country. Mm-hmm. There's just so much size there. But, in a tournament-style game, Miami has 3 guards that can all go get you a basket. And Miami, I think, and these are veterans too, Charlie Moore's been in college for, I think, 14 years now.
Seriously?
At least 14 years. Cameron McGusty, Charlie Moore, Isaiah Wong, those 3 guards – I think can get going, and we've seen them beat Duke during the regular season, and they've given a lot of teams trouble. I'm going to lean that, but it's an interesting, matchup between a team that's just so much size and a team that's smaller, but their guards are. It's tough to match up with those guards too at times, especially if they're hot.
Yeah, and we've said it, and people say it all the time, guards win in March, and I think that will, be true today. I'm going to agree with you as well, leaning Miami. If you followed me at all this year, I talked about Miami on the road. They were really good against the spread on the road. And this, similar setting, I think they're going to be able to keep up with USC, and they've shown that they can be tough in any environment. Doesn't matter if they're at home or away. So I agree. I think this is a 10-7 upset here. A lot of upsets on this side of the bracket so far from us in the Midwest. I like it. And lastly, we have Auburn at Jacksonville State. Now, I believe, if I'm correct here, Jacksonville State only got in because Bellarmine won the conference tournament because of that 4-year freaking rule transferring into D1. So, Auburn and Jacksonville State. What are your thoughts here? Any concern for Auburn?
No, I think I like Auburn in this pretty easily.
Too good talent-wise against any team now in that first round. Mm-hmm. So we've narrowed it down to 32 teams. We'll kind of go through this next. We have Gonzaga, and I guess we both agreed on Memphis here. Any thoughts here on these 2 teams?
Well, Gonzaga, the thing that's given them some trouble at times is, big physical athletes, which we saw when they played Duke. Memphis has that. My concern with Memphis is they just turn the ball over so much, and Gonzaga does to turnovers. You turn the ball over against them, you're in trouble. So I like Gonzaga in this, although I think they'll pull away late. But I think, like I said, when you have that talent, Jalen Duren versus like Drew Timme should be, a nice matchup to pay attention to. But I think Gonzaga's guards are a lot better. I think Nembhard will kind of control the game. So I like Gonzaga in that.
I like Gonzaga too. I think I agree with you. I think the front court battle is very, very interesting in this one. But I think Gonzaga is just too well coached, and we've seen Memphis already have their ups and downs. I think the turnovers will be an issue there. I'm going to go Gonzaga as well. Gonzaga's opponent will either be Uconn or Arkansas, the 5 seed against a 4 seed. What are your thoughts on this one?
That could be a really good game because it's Jalen Williams and Sonogo up front could be really physical. Two underrated, I think, nationally underrated bigs. That game I would look forward to really watching that one. What are you leaning on that?
I'm completely agree with you, which makes the next matchup against Gonzaga very interesting. I think Uconn, I think the size and the physicality alone is a little hard to handle for Arkansas. And again, I like RJ Cole. I think that he's one of those players who will step up in the tournament and have a big one. So I think let's go with Uconn here just for the sake of having some fun here. We'll talk about that next matchup after that. So then we have Texas Tech, the number 3 against, assuming Rutgers if they beat Alabama. So let's just say for argument's sake, Rutgers makes it to the next round. Who would you put, Texas Tech or Rutgers there?
I trust Texas Tech more, but Rutgers is playing well. But I think Texas Tech defensively is so good.
Yeah,
I think they have so much experience and. I just think it's tough to play against a team. They're so hard to score against. I like Texas Tech in it.
I like Texas Tech as well. Defense travels pretty well overall. I feel like if your offense is hidden, at least defense will take you to the next level and hopefully be enough to kind of keep you in the game. Texas Tech battle test, like I said before, with the Big 12. I agree with you. I think Texas Tech makes it to the Sweet 16. They will then face off against either Davidson or Duke based off our predictions. I kind of like Davidson here. What do you think against the Duke Blue Devils?
I think everyone's going to be on Duke in this game, and this kind of reminds me of would remind me of a game like a few years ago when you had Duke versus Central Florida. Remember with Taco Fall and that group, and everyone was on Duke. And this kind of has that feeling to me, like this could be a really good game. I can't go as far as taking Davidson, but man, I think this actually could be a really good game.
I agree. I think
you have veterans, you have the veterans, and then you have Duke is so young that's tough.
I feel like so when I was watching the game against Syracuse, you have somebody like Banchero who's so big, yet they're constantly just chucking threes, and they just sometimes I feel like they don't play through him enough in the front court and down in the post. I would like to see that more. And I get worried that maybe Duke tries to outshoot Davidson and they get a little bit 3-point happy. I think if you're looking to bet this game, I would definitely lean Davidson in a bet to cover the spread because they're going to be like a 5-6 point underdog at least minimum.
At least, yeah.
Yeah, one question we have here, and we kind of talk about this a bit too. We have a sleeper in the bracket. Before we made our picks so far, any team that kind of stood out as a sleeper for you in this bracket?
Let's see. I think the winner of the Rutgers-Alabama game could potentially, be that team. Yep. We just also talked about Davidson, which, that's a dangerous game, I think, for Duke. I agree with you on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to answer your question, Don, before we keep going here, I think in terms of an underdog or a sleeper, I like South Dakota State. If they can knock off Providence, they face off against Iowa next. That feels like a shootout, and I really just when you have a team as hot offensively as South Dakota State, they're going to be very hard to compete against. Other than that, though, I kind of like San Francisco as a 10. I think that's a strong bet if you're looking for a sleeper. And if you want to go with another team that I absolutely love, Boise State as the 8th seed as a possible sleeper, if they're able to get past Memphis, and of course, if they're able to take down Gonzaga, that would be a very, very intriguing sleeper pick there. But there's so many good ones this season that you can kind of lean your hat on. So, Davidson or Duke, if I had to twist your arm, who do you pick in that one?
Just to go back, was that a sleeper team for the whole bracket or just that region?
Well, I guess for the whole bracket, unless you want to pick a specific region in general too.
Yeah, no, for the whole bracket, I'm a couple teams that are kind of standing out to me that I think could be dangerous. I think Virginia Tech could be a team that is dangerous, and I also look at Colorado State. I think as a team that could be dangerous, like a sleeper team.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because you say, a 6 seed being a sleeper team, but I feel like a lot of people are going to fade Colorado State just because they know the name of Michigan or the name of Tennessee. But yeah, I agree. I think Colorado State and Virginia Tech, of course, red hot right now. And very hard to play against a team that is very, very confident. So we're going on. So again, Davidson or Duke there in that matchup, if you had to pick.
I'll take Duke.
I'll take Duke. We'll put Duke there in the next round. So going down further south to the east, we have Baylor and North Carolina. Thoughts
there? Well, Baylor's dealing with injuries right now. If you ask me this, mid-season, this would be an easy pick for me. People that may not know that Baylor lost maybe their most important big, and Jonathan Tchamwa-Tchatchoua, who's maybe the best ball screen defender in the country. I mean, he's that good, and they lost likely LJ Cryer. He seems like he's been a game time decision the last 2-3 weeks, and he hasn't played. So I would count on him even if he does play. I would say he's not going to be 100%, and he's their leading scorer. Actually, it's weird that their leading scorer comes off the bench, but I mean, he's that guy that gives them that boost. I think Baylor's down to 6 good players. I don't think they have a great bench with losing those 2 now. So I think their margin for error, it kind of drops, and they're still solid defensively, but I'm still going to take Baylor. But, I think North Carolina with their bigs can make this an interesting game.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's going to be a lot closer than people expect. But I agree with you. I think Baylor has, despite all of the injuries, despite all of the issues, they still managed to make it to a 1 seed. I think Baylor overall, they're just too good defensively. I think they're going to be able to swarm North Carolina's backcourt. So I agree with you, Baylor. I don't think it's going to be by much. I really don't. They will face off against a winner of St. Mary's and UCLA, a team we were just talking about earlier. What do you think on this one? I think I lean St. Mary's. How about you?
Man, you know what? And I want to take St. Mary's in this too, but I don't know. I have a tie the UCLA since early, but man, I do kind of think St. Mary's would probably win this just because the UCLA has been inconsistent. Like I said earlier, I think UCLA could drop out early, or with the guards and wings they have, can get hot and maybe go on another run. So I'll stay with you. I'm gonna go St. Mary's.
St. Mary's. That makes a really, really fun matchup against Baylor next. Going down the bracket here in the round of 32, the teams we picked were Virginia Tech and Purdue. The red-hot Virginia Tech team against Purdue's size. What do you think on that one?
I think this would be another good game, just because we know Purdue is not great defensively. I think Virginia Tech is really well coached and could run some good stuff against them. Ultimately, I'm going Purdue. Just size-wise, they have so much more size, and Jaden Ivey's he's kind of a game changer. But I think that would be a good game if those 2 teams square off. But I'll go Purdue.
I'll go Purdue as well. I don't think Virginia Tech's ready for that team that size down low. I think, like you said, red hot. I think they make this round interesting, but certainly don't pull away. I think Purdue takes it. Now, San Francisco, a team we talked about already, against a team we haven't really discussed yet, Kentucky Wildcats. A lot of expectation for Kentucky Wildcats. They have a great player in Oscar Tshiebwe down low, who's just been an absolute monster all season long. Who do you think in San Francisco against Kentucky?
I'm going to take Kentucky in this matchup. I think a guy like Tshiebwe, he's just so physical. So that's kind of the reason. I think the guard matchup could be solid, but I think Tshiebwe is the difference in this matchup.
I agree with you there. I think the matchup alone. I mean, if you guys haven't watched Oscar from Kentucky, oh my goodness, the guy's just a monster down low. A very, very good player. Going to the other side of the bracket before we get to the Sweet 16, we have Arizona at TCU. Any thoughts here? It's an interesting one for Arizona Wildcats.
Yeah, I think that could be a sneaky game. I like Arizona though in that. How about you?
I do too. I've backed Arizona all year, even though their turnover problems are a bit of a concern. I think Mathern, Coloco, and everybody else, Tubelis, all of them are so freaking good. And if
Yeah.
if they can control the ball, I think Arizona could win the national championship. I put a future pick on them earlier this season to do so. So I definitely think Arizona can advance. They would face off against Houston against the Illinois. So who do you think in that 5-4 matchup there?
Man, that game would be so physical.
It would.
You,
It really would.
when you think about how physical Houston is, and a guy like Kofi Coburn, that game that I would love to see that just matchup because I think that there might be a fight in that game that breaks out. That's how rough that one might get. I think that one could get. I would love to see that matchup. I'm going to lean Illinois just with the veteran guards. I think about, like I mentioned earlier, a younger guard like Jamal Shed going up against a Trent Frazier, who's been there 5 years. Fabian White is really good for Houston, but he's 6'8". You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He may match up a bit with Kofi, who's 6'11" and just so strong. So I like Illinois in that matchup.
I do too. I'm gonna take Illinois there. I think Houston had a great run. Congratulations to them making it to a 5 seed despite their injuries. But I think Illinois is just too physical, and they're kind of that experience now to get to the next level. Going down that bracket, we have Colorado State and Tennessee, which I think is an extraordinary matchup. But I lean Tennessee a bit here. What do you think on this one?
Yeah, I agree. I think Tennessee, like I said earlier, and me and you talked about defensively, they're just really tough defensively. They don't give you much. Their guards are good. And Tennessee's, like we talked about with Iowa, they're playing really well at the right time. So I think that momentum is going to carry them in that.
Yeah, I agree with you. Tennessee's a strong team right now, making a case for the best team of the SEC. If you're looking at for a future pick to who would win the national championship, I'm sure you can get a solid value on Tennessee right now. The 3 seed, yeah, I'm going to lean Tennessee. I think they're just too good at the right time. And then that leaves Ohio State and Villanova as their next opponent. I'm kind of torn on this one, but what do you think on Ohio State with Villanova?
Man, it's tough to bet against Villanova.
I know.
I think for me, Villanova's guards are really good. They're one of the top free throw shooting teams in the country. I don't like their depth. I don't think they have much of a bench. I don't think they get much inside. Eric Dixon's solid, but they don't get much inside. But the experience of Villanova, probably Gillespie's last year. I think his tournament got cut short last year with that injury. So I think Villanova's playing really well right now. I think they're playing their best basketball of the year right now. So I'll take Villanova in that. I'll
take Villanova as well. I agree with you. I think they're playing well. I mean, they obviously beat Providence twice, so they're able to play against top competition. It's hard to bet against Jay Wright. I worry about E.J. Liddell against Villanova's front court, but I think overall the back court from Nova is just too good to not make it to the Sweet 16. So I'm going to agree with you on that one. Going down to the Midwest, we have Kansas at San Diego State, which is an awesome matchup. What do you think on that one?
I mentioned earlier that I think San Diego State at times they have trouble scoring. I think Kansas in this matchup just has too much talent. I think San Diego State can make it a game, but I think Kansas has 4 starters that are all, they have 4 really nice starters. Point guard play with Kansas worries me a little bit. And Remy Martin, the last couple games has kind of stepped up. I wasn't as high on Kansas. I thought they may kind of lose possibly even first weekend. I thought they may be that team, but as I mentioned earlier, I like their draw. And I just think they have too much for San Diego State.
Yeah, I agree. I think if San Diego State was a a bit better offensively. I think this might be leaning more towards that, them upsetting Kansas. But I agree with you. I think Kansas got a good draw out of this one. I think they're going to take advantage of that. I have Kansas going to the Sweet 16 as well. Next up, we have if these two teams make it, Iowa versus South Dakota State. I think you know who I like in this one. What are you thinking here, though? Iowa versus South Dakota State.
I'm going to let you take this one.
No, well, I'm torn because you're very convincing with Iowa. They're red hot. You have a player like Keegan Murray playing great. They kind of had a great end of that in the tournament run with that bank shot to win it. One of their games. I can't remember what it was now, but I'm concerned with South Dakota State because of their defensive woes. Even though they score a bunch, they don't really defend well. I think that's where Iowa has the advantage. I think if it's a shootout, I think I'll have to lean the better defense of these two teams. Would you agree then maybe Iowa's kind of the lean here?
Yeah, I think this could be a really exciting game. When I think of games that could, like we talk about at the end of the March Madness, I think we can look back on this one if this matchup happens and being like, man, that was one of the more fun matchups. I lean Iowa just because I think Keegan Murray is such a big mismatch that, he can kind of go inside out. He's just such a tough matchup. Although I think this would be an intriguing game, but I like Iowa.
Yeah, I'll take Iowa as well. I think players like Keegan Murray make the difference here. If you're looking for an over-under, probably take the over on this one because I have a feeling this one could even go overtime and have a really good offensive shootout here. And next up on that side of the bracket, we have Iowa State versus Wisconsin. I like Wisconsin here. What do you think? Do you think Iowa State can pull it off? I
agree with you. I like Wisconsin in that.
Yeah, I like Wisconsin. The veteran squad or an experienced squad, I think they'd get it done here against Iowa State. And they would face off against Miami and Auburn. That's a tough draw for Auburn, I would say. What do you think on this one?
Definitely agree with you on that. Auburn has a big front court advantage, I think, in that game because Miami's not big, and you have Jabari Smith and Walker Kessler who are, Jabari Smith is really skilled. But I think Miami's guards, that's the concern with Auburn. Their guards can be wild.
Yeah.
Shots, right?
Yeah.
Shot selection is not great. Like Wendell Green, Katie Johnson. I think Katie Johnson the other day was 0 for 14 shooting. And, I feel like, I don't know, just like shot selection is a major concern for me with Auburn. And, you need guards to win in March. And, man, I can see them in a close game. And we've seen it before, 2 minutes left, game's tied, and they're not getting the ball to their best player. Their guards are firing up 25-footers, which, where do you lean on this game?
I completely agree with you. I think Miami will take advantage of that. 1 or 2 games here, seeing that, fine, whatever. I feel like this has become a consistent trend with Auburn, and that's a big concern, especially late in games. It's not just in the first, 10 minutes. They're doing this in the final few possessions. They're just chucking threes, and I think you're right. I think Auburn, as high as their expectations were entering this season, I think their shot selection right now is just too poor. I think I'm going to go with Miami here to upset them there. We now have our Sweet 16, so we can go through the final 8 games and then close out this one. We have top to the Western region. We have Gonzaga versus Uconn. I like this matchup a lot. What do you think if these two teams meet up in the Sweet 16?
I think Gonzaga's kind of pace plays into their favor in this. I think they're going to get up and down. But UConn's pretty physical. That could potentially give them some problems, but I like Gonzaga in this matchup.
I do too. I think one of the concerns I have with UConn is the fact that they rely a lot on Sanogo to kind of get their offense going. And if he is either has foul trouble because of Holmgren and Timmy, and they had to shift their offense a bit. I just don't know if RJ Cole is enough to keep up with Gonzaga. That's my biggest concern, and that's what I saw a few times this season. Offensively, they can have their woes if they can't get into the paint. So I'm going to lean with you. I'm going to go with Gonzaga to make it to the Elite Eight. I just think they're too good offensively and just overall too good. They would face off against either Texas Tech or Duke. A really good game, honestly. What do you think on this one?
Yeah, this is another game where you have a veteran team against a team that's young and talented, which kind of also reminds me back to that tournament when Duke had like Zion and RJ Barrett and those guys, and they ran up on Michigan State, a veteran team. Same round, Elite Eight game, or Sweet 16, I'm sorry. But this kind of reminds me of that kind of game where, man, Duke's guard play worries me. At times, I know Duke has, probably 5 NBA players in their starting lineup, but the youth thing, it still worries me with Duke. Where do you lean in this one?
I completely agree with you. I also think the shot selection at times is a bit troubling if you're a Duke fan. And I think that we saw this against Syracuse. I mean, they just didn't do enough inside. They try to kind of outshoot Syracuse from beyond the arc. And I think Texas Tech defensively will kind of give them problems. I do think experience matters in the tournament. And when you have a young roster like that, I'm going to have to lean Texas Tech to make it to the Elite Eight. I think I'll have to agree with you on that one. Going down to the next side of the bracket in the Eastern region, we have Baylor at St. Mary's or versus St. Mary's, the 1-5 matchup if these two teams meet up. This is a good one. What do you think on Baylor versus St. Mary's?
Man, I think that would be another really good game. I think St. Mary's could maybe be that. I think the West Coast Conference could have a really good showing, and that's actually a pretty good matchup in my opinion for St. Mary's if that were to happen. Now Baylor, their starting 5 is really good and they're pretty athletic. I go back and forth on this one because I can see this game going either way. How about you?
I agree with you. I can see it going either way. I do think that Baylor's injury issues, or I guess short bench overall, will be the biggest problem here. We know that St. Mary's can play again at a high level. They obviously beat Gonzaga, so I lean St. Mary's just because I don't think Baylor has the roster at this point in time to kind of make it. They had Chachua and they had Cryer fully healthy. Then I think it'd be a different story. I think they probably could win the entire thing, but. I'm going to lean St. Mary's with you. I'm going to pick them to go to the Elite Eight. I like it. They would face off against Purdue or Kentucky, which is a great size front court matchup overall. What are you thinking on this one?
I think this would be a great game because an interesting thing is how I think, Purdue has more size. And as much as Sheboy is pretty much controlled, I think out-rebounded every opponent he's played against this year.
Yeah.
He's going up against a guy 7'4". I mean, Sheboy is only 6'8". We know how strong he is, but he's 6'8", 6'9", and he's going up against Travion Williams and Zach Edey, which, would could potentially give him problems. And when's the last time Kentucky was in a big game, and they didn't have the most athletic player on the floor, which Jaden Ivey, would be that. He'd be the most dynamic, probably, guard in the game. I can't remember, it's been a while. You don't see Kentucky, run up on that. So Purdue's defense has, I think they're 100 in KenPom. I think their offense, they may be 1 or 2. So I think this would be a great game. Where are you leaning on this one? I think I would lean Kentucky, but I have a tough time with this one.
I actually lean Purdue here for the reasons that you described. I think that's, Oscar is used to being able to dominate and now he's facing off against, 2 really, really forceful front court players. I don't know. This is one you can kind of argue with both sides and kind of flip the coin here. I think this is Purdue's year to make that big run. I think they've kind of been primed for it since the beginning of the year started. I mean, there's obviously some concerns with them as well. I think for every Big Ten team, there's a few concerns with them with certain things. But, I think that front court against Oscar, he might have a bad game. If he has a bad game, where can they kind of go to next here? So I think I'm gonna lean with Purdue here.
Yeah,
Pick
okay.
them for the next round, just for argument's sake here. I think the St. Mary's game against them would be kind of interesting, so we'll go with them for argument's sake here. Going back up top, we'll go to the South region, Arizona and against Illinois, which is a rematch from earlier this season. Illinois had a big lead, and Arizona came storming back to upset Illinois. This is an awesome front court battle again. What do you think on this one?
One thing we haven't mentioned with Arizona is Kirk Risa. Their Arizona starting point guard could possibly be out,
That's right. Yep.
which is kind of just something to pay attention to because, I mean, he's a really good shooter. I think that's going to be something that's going to be important because I think in order for them to maybe even win the whole thing, they're going to need him back. So something to monitor. But yeah, I mean, there's so much size on Arizona. I think they lead the country in assists. They really pass the ball, and they're just so elite. So I like Arizona in that.
Yeah, I'll take Arizona as well. I like I said, the size matchup here is really, really intriguing. I think Kofi can have a good game, but when you have three big players like they do, with Koloko, Tabellis, and Valo, and they just kind of they come at you in waves. And when you have a player like Mathurin, who's just really like the NBA level talent, I think Arizona's the way to go. I'm going to completely agree with you on that one. They would face off against either Tennessee or Villanova, which is going to be an awesome game. What do you think on that in that one? If that is the matchup we see,
another game that would be really good. As much, I think Jay Wright might be the best coach in the country.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, he's just so good. But in this particular matchup, I think I lean Tennessee. I think the ceiling for Villanova, as well as they're playing, with them, not having much inside scoring. And like I said earlier, they don't have much of a bench. I think foul trouble and things like that can possibly come up to get them. So I lean Tennessee.
I lean Tennessee as well. I think it's just them getting hot at the right time and them being so talented and stout defensively. For me, Villanova's roster before the season started, I thought could make the Sweet 16. I think this is where I'm going to kind of, hop off that train and say, hey, good job this year, but, not good enough to beat Tennessee. So I'll agree with you on that lean as well. Going down to Midwest here, if these two teams match up, it would be Kansas against Iowa. A really good 1-5 matchup there. What do you think on that one?
Kansas, Iowa. Well, Iowa is playing really well. They probably have the best player on the floor.
Yeah.
But I think collectively, Kansas maybe has, I think Kansas may have too much, but Keegan Murray is like on a mission. He's, he's playing well. Iowa's playing really well. Like I said, I wasn't as high on Kansas, but I think they got a pretty good draw. And a lot of times the bracket is about matchups. Yeah. So I think this game could go either way if it happens. What do you think with that matchup?
I agree as well. I think it could go either way. It's similar to what we saw with, I think it was Houston last year, right? They faced off like every single round they had double-digit matchups. Yeah. Just kind of, obviously not double-digit seeds for this particular route for Kansas, but I agree. Yeah. I think it's a good one overall. I think in terms of talent-wise, they're definitely, superior than Iowa. It just depends on whether they can stop Murray or not. If they can't stop him, then I think Iowa could kind of take the cake here. I like Kansas here. I'll go with your decision here as well. I'll approve them going forward. So let's put them to the next round as well. Let's see here. Give me 1 second. Let me scroll down. All right. We have next, if these two teams match up, Wisconsin versus Miami. What do you think on this one here?
I think a healthy Johnny Davis, which I'm thinking he will be. We haven't really brought him up. I know he probably had his worst game of the year. The last game they got knocked out. But that was his first game back. I'm counting on him being healthy. Obviously, if he's not healthy, they're a different team. But I don't think Miami really has anyone to match up with him. A guy like Tyler Wall down low, I think, is really underrated, who can give, I think, Miami a lot of trouble. So I like Wisconsin in this.
Yeah, I like Wisconsin as well. If Davis plays great like he has been all season, it's kind of like the same thing with Murray. You get those players
Yeah.
playing hot at the right time. I think they can do it. Um, I'll go Wisconsin. I have been kind of iffy on Wisconsin in the past. They haven't always stepped up to the expectations that we've seen them, but I think this year in particular they have that it factor. When you have an it factor like Davis who can come take over a game, I think Miami, although they are really strong on the road, and I think if you're looking at the spread, I think if you're looking at a 3.5, 4 spread, I would take Miami. But in terms of who I think can pull out, I think Wisconsin is going to be too good overall, and they'll have the playmakers to kind of make it to the next round. So I'm going to take Wisconsin there as well, which is great. So now we have our Elite Eight. We have a few more games to go. Going back up top to the Western Conference, Western region, we have Gonzaga against Texas Tech, which I think is a great, great battle. What do you think on this one if they make it that far?
Well, for the people that maybe don't know, Gonzaga and Texas Tech have played already this season on a neutral court. I believe that was the Jerry Colangelo Classic. Gonzaga won that game by 14, which at the time Texas Tech, wasn't really on. People weren't really talking about Texas Tech at that time, but I think Texas Tech has really improved. One thing to think about is all the transfers they brought in.
Yeah.
Some of those teams, it takes a while for those teams with, 5 to 7 transfers to kind of kick in. And around this time is usually when they're playing their best basketball. I think that's what's happened. That's what happened with Texas Tech. Ultimately, though, I feel like Gonzaga just has too much scoring and too much skill. Although, Texas, I don't know if Texas Tech can score enough points to win that game, as physical and as good as they are. I like Gonzaga in that.
Yeah, I'm actually going to, because you mentioned that they played earlier this year, so I'm actually going to pull up the box score right now to see exactly some of the details of that round. They played way back when, I can't remember when it was back in December, I believe, December 18th, right before the Christmas break. It was a 69-55 win against Texas Tech. Wow, they only scored 55 points in that game. If you look at the box score, Texas Tech shot 31% from 3 and 37% from the field, while Gonzaga was in the 40s there. And turnover-wise, it was about even 12-10. I agree. I think if you obviously want to lean, if it's defense against defense, you maybe lean experience or who has a bit of the better offense. But in this particular matchup, I think you're looking at Gonzaga's high power offense against Texas Tech, even if Texas Tech slows them down to keeping them to 66, 67 points. I just don't think I agree with you. I think offensively they just cannot get to that point where they can kind of take advantage of Gonzaga shooting maybe, we're scoring only 70 points or so. So, yeah, I think Gonzaga, they have a lot to prove. A lot of people doubt them because they are out of the WCC, but I think Gonzaga is out on a mission, and I think they can definitely take care of Texas Tech. That would put the next matchup would be St. Mary's against Purdue. If I keep scrolling down here, yeah, that's another good one that we've been kind of looking at. What do you think on that one?
Well, I think this is as good a chance as Purdue is going to have maybe to get to a Final Four. Yep. I think Jaden Ivey has to be aggressive all tournament. I think their defense looked better. I mean, I know that they just played Iowa and their defense isn't great. I don't know. I just feel like this has to be the year that Purdue gets there, at least makes a Final Four run. And me and you talked about that Purdue-Kentucky game. I think those two teams at the bottom of the bracket are probably the two best teams in this region. Yeah. So I think Purdue's size and, like we talked about, Jaden Ivey is just such a tough matchup. I think maybe St. Mary's miracle run kind of ends here if they get there, So,
yeah, exactly.
Purdue.
Yeah, who knows? Baylor could surprise us, or North Carolina could surprise us for all we know. But yeah, if this does end up happening, I lean Purdue. I mean, we have Matthias Tass out of St. Mary's, who was 6'10", 245. I mean, he has an absolute battle that day with Ivy and Trevion Williams down low. But in terms of the next, biggest guy, Kyle Bowen, 6'8", it just size-wise, they're not really able to compete with someone like Purdue. And I think, as you mentioned, and as I mentioned earlier, this seems like Purdue's year to make the Final Four. It just feels like it. I think they're good enough, and there's such a tough matchup for basically everybody. They would face off against Gonzaga in our little, hypothetical bracket here. So we go to the other side of the field. We go to the South region, Arizona versus Tennessee, which is a rematch to an incredible game that we saw earlier this season where Tennessee pulled off the home win. Fulkerson had just an awesome last few minutes there. What do you think on this rematch between Arizona and Tennessee?
I like Arizona. I think this would kind of be like a revenge game. Neutral court. Once again, I think Kerr Kriisa's health is going to be big. But Arizona just has so much scoring. Tennessee struggles scoring as good as they are defensively. It kind of reminds me of the Gonzaga-Texas Tech matchup where can they score enough points to, keep up with Arizona. So I like Arizona in that matchup.
I like Arizona too, and I'm going to tell you another reason why. When you look back at that game against Arizona, so Arizona goes in a hole very, very early on. They make a huge comeback. At the end of the half was 34-21 Tennessee. They made a comeback. They ended up winning that second half by 9 points. So it was 77-73 final, but Fulkerson in that game just took over late. He was 8 for 13 from the field, 24 points, 10 rebounds, but he was just kind of taking that team on his back and just taking the next level. So I'm going to agree with you. I think this is a good revenge spot, and even though Fulkerson had a big game in that matchup, I think Arizona gets, if healthy with Kriisa, they're able to kind of make it to the next round to get to the Final Four. So I'll agree with you on that one as well. And then lastly, to round out the Final Four, we have Kansas against Wisconsin. That's an interesting one. Who do you think if this is the Elite Eight matchup we have here?
Well, you would have two All-American wings, probably first-team All-Americans with Ochai Agbaji and Johnny Davis. So I think that matchup would be really good. Where are you leaning on this one?
It's, you feel like you can trust Bill Self in this particular scenario. I know. I don't know how involved. I haven't watched a whole lot of Kansas recently, so maybe you can kind of shed some light on how McCormick's been playing lately. I know there's been a lot of expectations on McCormick. Do you have any ideas on how he's been in form of recent?
Yeah, I think he's played a little bit better, but he's been inconsistent a lot. I think he's played better. But he's like another one of those guys that kind of, he can go out and get 5 points and 4 rebounds, and you're like, this guy has so much more talent than that. Where's the production? So that bothers me with him, and that's like I said earlier, I think Kansas got a pretty good draw if things kind of hold up. I'm torn on that one.
Yeah, so I remember I bet on Kansas earlier this year against Stephen F. Austin, and that was one game where McCormick just kind of disappeared. And I had expectations for him coming into the year. I thought he was going to be really good for them in the paint. I thought he could, really kind of facilitate as well from the inside out, But he just hasn't been there. I think that's one game where I kind of worry about. Not that Wisconsin has a tremendous amount of size, but I know like Wall, he's 6'9", 221. Crowell, he's their bigger guy, 7 foot. I mean, maybe their front court might give him some problems, and I know they can also shoot from basically anywhere. I like Wisconsin. I don't like picking them. I kind of hard to trust them, but I kind of lean Wisconsin. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. You know what, Wisconsin, like metrics wise, and they're not great, but something about this Wisconsin team where they just find ways to win.
Exactly.
Another thing with injuries, just to bring up, Johnny Davis is going to have to be 100% for this to happen, as we talked about with so many other guys with injury concerns. But who's the guy? Is there a guy in the bracket to you that you think can carry a team to a Final Four, kind of like a Kemba Walker, maybe not national title, but a Final Four similar run to like that? Is there a guy that you see that could, kind of do that?
Yeah, Mathurin out of Arizona. I think he's the kind of it factor player that you look for. I've loved him all season long. I think he's somebody who, if the front court has foul trouble, if they're just not getting the ball down, I think he steps up, increases plays, especially if he's out, and kind of takes over a game there. Colin Gillespie out of Nova. I don't know if he has the firepower to do that, but you look at Wisconsin, someone like Johnny Davis, if
Yeah.
healthy, can be that player. There's so many good individual players, but if I had to pick one, I think I have to leave Mathurin out of Arizona.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll agree with you on Wisconsin. I think they're kind of that team that's flying under the radar. Like
Yep.
It reminds me a little bit of and you see it every year that happen. Like Houston was kind of like the team last year that was, not many people believed in, but they just found ways to keep winning games. It kind of reminds me of Wisconsin a little bit.
I agree, and I think a lot of people agree with me a bit too, where they're not really sure they can trust Wisconsin in these big moments. And I think that might be a reason why people pick against them. Like, oh, Wisconsin, here we go again. Let's pick against them. And I think this is the one year that exception. And same thing with Purdue. I think you can argue with Purdue as well. They've kind of had their past issues. I think this is the year they have it put together here. So I'm going to agree with you as well on that decision there. And that leaves the Final Four, the last 2 games or last 3 games to discuss. Arizona against Wisconsin. Who would you lean in this particular matchup?
Well, that would be another nice matchup of kind of star players with Johnny Davis and Mathurin. But I think overall, I think Arizona just has so much. They're so skilled. Arizona's A game to me, as I talked with Leif Tulane a couple of days ago on his podcast, Arizona's A game is they may have the best A game in the country.
Yep.
I think their game against USC at USC was one of the better performances this year, by a team I think I've seen this year. Mm-hmm. So I like Arizona.
I like Arizona too. You're right. If they are on their game, they are by far the best team in the country. At least in my opinion, they're so big. They can run. They can run the whole court. Everybody on that lineup can run. And when you have that 1-2-3 combo of Ballo, Koloko, and Tabelis, it's really hard to just stop them in any part, whether it's the paint or beyond the arc. I'm going to go Arizona. I think again they protect the ball a little bit better in the tournament. I think they can make it to the national championship game, and they would face off against either Gonzaga or Purdue. I like Purdue. What do you think on this one?
Well, we know the Big Ten's had the title drought. They haven't won it. They haven't won it since 2000. Gonzaga has never won it. We know it's going to likely happen. It has to happen. They're getting there. So I'll say this: our Final Four has someone's going to break their streak. Either the Big Ten's going to win one, or the West Coast. The last time the West Coast, won it was Arizona in '97.
Oh my
so
gosh.
It's been 25 years. I think to me this feels like the year of the West Coast kind of powers coming together. And if I had to pick a dream matchup in the tournament, it would be Gonzaga, Arizona. Just because, I think that game would be so entertaining with how those two teams get up the floor and those offenses and the storyline. Arizona's coach was just an assistant coach at Gonzaga, Tommy Lloyd. I think the storyline for that would be unbelievable. So I personally, I lean Gonzaga in that matchup. But I think that would be, Purdue, you might have the 3 best offenses in the country if that was the Final Four with Gonzaga, Arizona, Purdue. So I think that, but I lean Gonzaga. I just feel like with Timmy coming back, Nembhard coming back, I kind of feel like they're on a mission, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Of course, you're concerned with whether Purdue will be too physical down low against Timmy and Holmgren, and whether they get into foul trouble or just can't stop, people like Williams and Edey. But yeah, it just feels like one of those storylines that you just expect to happen in the national championship game where Gonzaga's there. As much as I do like Purdue, I wanted to win it. I have to agree with you here. I'm going to pick Gonzaga as well to kind of make it. I think Arizona versus Gonzaga would be an incredible matchup. Just again, storyline alone, having the mentor and the mentee kind of going at it. I think it's a great it kind of seems like it's going to happen this year. But yeah, this is one of those seasons that even though these are 1-3, 1-3 seeds, to have a Final Four of Purdue, Arizona, Wisconsin, and Gonzaga is a bit bizarre to hear, say it out loud. And I think it's pretty cool. I think this is the year that kind of something unknown happens. So I'll agree with you here. Even though I like Purdue, I think I'm going to go with Gonzaga for our bracket here. So that leaves the final game, Gonzaga versus Arizona. What do you think on this last matchup?
Well, I would love to see this game. I think it would be one of the better, more entertaining, I should say, one of the more entertaining finals, because we've had good finals, but I feel like they haven't been like super entertaining. I know Villanova's put on a show a couple times, but I think both teams would be up for this challenge. I just feel like Gonzaga, if they're going to win it all, I think this has to be the year. They've been so close. People doubt everyone. A lot of people doubt them. I just feel like with Nembhard back, I think they have 3 maybe top 5 players at their respective positions. I talked about this. I think Timmy's a top 5 center. I think Chet's a top 5 foreman. I think Nembhard's a top 5 point guard. In Arizona, most of their players are sophomores, where I see Gonzaga as more upperclassmen, guys that have been there. They one game away last year. I'm going to take Gonzaga, although, like you said, Arizona's A game is just really good. So for me, I lean Gonzaga. How about you?
I lean Gonzaga because as good as Arizona can be, and they can be excellent, their turnovers have put them in big holes against tougher competition. We saw it against Tennessee. We saw it against Illinois. They're fortunate enough to have the talent to get out of those holes and pull out, wins and close games. But I think if you do find yourself in a hole against a team like Gonzaga, they're just too good offensively to not take advantage of those mistakes. So I think you're right. I think this feels like the time where Mark Few finally gets his title. Tommy Lloyd has a great program building right now in Arizona, but this feels like, okay, Tommy, your turn is coming up maybe next year, the year after, but this is Few's chance to kind of put his name on a national trophy. So I think going to go with Gonzaga as well as the 1 seed to win it all. But that completes our hypothetical bracket that we put together tonight. So any last thoughts on this one? Any kind of thoughts on maybe a team that you wish would have made it, or anything else you can kind of think of?
Let me think. I just think this is more of a wide open tournament than in years past. Last year we had Gonzaga, Baylor, and it was like, it feels like one of those 2 teams are going to win it. They're just like a tier above everyone. I think this year it's more wide open.
Yeah.
I know we're going to be seeing everyone's picks, and people have different picks. It's always fun to talk about the bracket and gives us something to like track as we're watching these games. But yeah, I think this one's wide open. I think we're going to see, some upsets. There's always going to be a Cinderella team that goes on an Elite 8, Final Four possible run. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think this is going to be an awesome tournament, and I do like the parity this year because, there's going to be some teams that go on a run maybe that weren't expected.
Yeah, and you're going to see teams like even Murray State or San Francisco or, Virginia Tech who feel like they can compete with those higher teams and who feel like they have a chance. Even a team like Akron, I mean, they almost beat Ohio State this year. They feel like they belong in this tournament, and I completely agree with you. You cannot tell me right now one team that you say guaranteed will make the final. Last year was 100% that. You had Gonzaga, you had Baylor, and everybody else was underneath of them. There's some great teams like Purdue, Arizona, etc., but each of these teams have a flaw. Each of these teams have a concern. And I think you could absolutely see a team like Tennessee or even Alabama for who knows, if they finally figure it out to kind of make that run, which is great for us as fans. It sucks if you're trying to bet these games, but it's good as a fan overall. But again, so thank you again, Mark, for joining me. I know it was a long show, but we were able to get through the bracket and kind of put it together. I know you and I will be talking throughout the March Madness and the run and all that stuff. If you do happen to follow Mark, I know he said he might be putting together that Elite Eight or Sweet 16 tournament brackets. So check out his Twitter account. Like I said, it's one of the best that I follow. Very inspirational stuff at times, and always college basketball as well. Any last thoughts there, Mark, on where people can find you?
Yeah. Once again, I'm at Marky Futures on Twitter. Like Mike said, I think I'll put out my brackets challenge tomorrow. So
Awesome.
Feel free to participate in that. It should be something, another reason to give you to watch some of these games and hope your teams that you pick win. So I'll probably put that out tomorrow. So look out for that. And really nice talking to you, Mike. Had a really good time.
Yeah, Mark. We've connected on Twitter for so long, the past 2.5 years.
Yeah.
We never actually spoke face to face. So it's funny. That's what happens with Twitter. You can build these connections, but don't even know what the person sounds like or looks like sometimes.
Yeah.
But again, thank you so much, Mark. We'll be in touch. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a great night, everybody.